Hello, Starshine. My name is Liz, and this is my channel, Simsational Stories. If you have not seen my videos before and you enjoy this one, please like and subscribe. And maybe check out my Facebook page, where this whole thing began, as well. All relevant links are in the description below, and of course, if you're a Sims player and you'd like to download any of the characters featured in my stories, just search the hashtag Simsational Stories on the Sims 4 gallery. All original content is created by This Is Not Eric. Alrighty then. So, welcome. And what is up, Buttercup? Are you having a good day or a bad day? Whichever your answer, please allow me to distract you from your life and tell you a story, a Simsational story. Before I begin though, I'd like to issue this blanket content and trigger warning. The following story is just Sims, hey. I'm not going to apologise for treating them terribly, if that's what I've done. But I do want to assure you now that although I mean absolutely no harm, I completely understand if you feel unable to consume my content. Many loves, and we will catch each other on the internet elsewhere. Okay, so now we've gotten that over with, let's go. Today's story is from Audre Whitman, the Audacious Maid, and we're at chapter 3. If you have not seen previous chapters and would like to catch up, there are playlists available on my channel so you can hear the entire story in chronological order. The rest of us are going to move on from where we left off last time though. So without further ado. Anastasia and Anton Lewis had been together since high school, almost 15 years. But all that was done now. She had caught him cheating on her with their housemaid, Audre Whitman. As she ranted and raved at them, Anastasia was enraged to see her words having almost no effect on the pair. They had no shame. Audrey looked at her with triumphant eyes, while Anton rolled his eyes with a "ain't she done yet" kind of a long-suffering air. Anastasia couldn't believe it. They were the ones in the wrong, and yet they were acting like she was being some kind of a drama queen after having walked in on them red-handed. Suddenly Anton snapped back, surprising Anna with his ferocity. He shouted that this was all her fault. She'd driven him to this. He criticised both her woohoo techniques and the frequency of which they woohooed, her appearance, her personality, and her acting abilities. She was scum beneath his feet. He was the best thing that had ever happened to her, and she was going to be lost without him and his military paycheck paying all her bills. After that fight, Anton left with Audrey. Anastasia was devastated. She was so desperately and inexplicably hurt by the cruel things he had said. Never in her wildest imagination could she have pictured him treating anyone like that. Least of all her. They'd been together since high school, for almost 15 years, and she'd thought he loved her like she loved him. But he'd destroyed that illusion for her now, and in doing so, he had destroyed her too. Anton had moved into Audrey's apartment in Evergreen Harbour. Things were actually going quite well, and Anton had even been promoted at work. He had finally gotten the lifestyle with Audrey that he'd always wanted with Anna, a beautiful woman to come home to who greeted him with unquestioning adoration and dinner on the table when he got home from work. It didn't hurt that she was almost 15 years younger than him. Audrey had been fired from her job as a maid for professional misconduct after Anastasia put in a complaint about her, so she'd gotten another job at a local cafe as a barista. It wasn't a job she particularly enjoyed, but it helped pay the bills, and she was proud of herself for having hustled something else up so quickly. She'd been out distributing resumes the very day she got her official notice, and she was working at the bistro a week later. Anton wasn't as happy with Audrey's new job as she was, though. He didn't really want her to work at all, and argued that with his new job, she had no need to take up such a menial position ever again, as he could afford to support her now. She could go to university if she wanted, or pursue some other hobby, and otherwise just stay home and keep the house nice. He would like it if she stayed home, but, of course, it was her decision. Anton always said it was her decision, but that didn't stop him from expressing his opinion. A lot. Audrey got a little sick of it after a while. He was being ridiculous. Just because he could afford to support her didn't mean that she had to let him do that. She liked going to work. It was fun, and it made her feel good. She wanted to be able to contribute to their household bills and not just rely on Anton to look after her. Audrey tried to prove to Anton that she didn't need to stay home to keep the house nice. She was easily able to work the household chores around her shifts at work, and he was never going to have to worry about coming home from work hungry because she only worked mornings, so she was always home in the afternoons to cook his dinner before he got there. Audrey and Anton continued to argue about the issue, but Audrey stood firm on the matter. She wasn't going to quit her job just because her boyfriend had enough money to support their household without her wage. She was only 20 years old. She didn't want to retire and become a housewife already. She wanted to have a bit of a life first at least. Surely Anton understood that. Suddenly something happened that blew all their petty squabbles right out the window. Anton was sent an email by a coworker who asked if he'd hired a lawyer yet. A lawyer for what? He'd thought before clicking on the link to find out what the heck Ian was talking about. And then Anna's video loaded up and started to play. He read the title of the video as she introduced herself, and his heart nearabouts stopped with horror. What had she done? In a panic, he called Audrey over from the kitchen. Together, Anton and Audrey watched the vlog, which didn't exactly paint Anton in a good light. He hadn't told Audrey anything about Simsational at all, let alone that he'd had an affair there too, and may have left a child behind. He hadn't actually realised that Anastasia had known about that. But anyway, Anton had only told Audrey that that had been where they'd moved from. Her face held the same look of fascinated shock throughout the whole video, until she herself was mentioned. Although not by name. Anna took the kind liberty of calling Audrey the Maid the entire time, never once actually naming her. Anastasia had bared her very soul in her video, and she was receiving a viral wave of support from the public in return. Her video spoke to every broken-hearted man and woman who watched it, every person who'd ever been cheated on, and there were thousands of sympathetic responses in the comments. Her video was everywhere, and everyone knew her name and her side of the story now. Audrey couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was all this true? Did Anton really maybe have a secret love child with some woman named Karen back in Simsational? How could he walk away like that, not knowing if it was his baby or not? Would he walk away from her as easily as he had this other woman, and then Anastasia? She had been his wife, and Anton had cheated on her twice, hadn't he? Honestly, how was Audrey ever supposed to trust him? After she was finally spent, Anton took her chin in his hand and tilted her face up so she would look him in his beautiful green eyes. Him leave her? Never, he softly yet ferociously reassured her. She was his whole world, his everything. His very soul only breathed because she did, and he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. Anna and Kellyanne, for that's who Karen really was. Well, look, he'd honestly thought he loved Anna until he met Audrey. And as for Kellyanne, she had merely been his neighbour. He'd never slept with her. Anastasia was lying. Anton needed Audrey to understand. He and Anastasia had been together since high school, and they had lived together in Simsational next door to a woman named Kellyanne Calthus. That much at least was true. But the rest of it? The story Anastasia told in her vlog about him and Kellyanne having an affair was all her own paranoid fantasy. She had hated that he worked so much. And Kellyanne's baby's father had been her boyfriend, their other neighbour, Nick Lockyer. He'd heard that they even had another baby together now, but he didn't know for sure because he'd left that part of his life behind. He'd left everything behind him, hadn't he? And all for her. She, Audrey, was all he had left. And that was, honestly, how he liked it. Didn't she feel the same way? By the end of the argument, Anton had Audrey feeling a lot better about him, and even a little sheepish herself. She couldn't believe how quickly she had believed Anastasia. It was honestly lucky that Anton was so lovely and kind. He forgave her for doubting him and his love almost immediately. She had hurt him, of course, but he understood. He had so much love for her that he even defended her to herself and insisted that she had nothing to apologise for. After that, Anton did what his work colleague had originally suggested and called his lawyer. He'd been reluctant to start the divorce proceedings so far. Not because he wasn't sure, he told Audrey, just because he'd wanted to be kind and give Anastasia some time to adjust, but that had been a mistake. Look what she'd done with her time. She had made a hate video about him, and he was going to make her pay for it. And that brings us to the end of Chapter 3 of Audre Whitman, The Audacious Maid. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can tune in soon to hear the next chapter. Or like I said, look us up on Facebook. Bye!